You know what? What really amazes me is that people are amazed that 63% of Canadians favour the death penalty. Now, Ron Gray, former director of the Christian Heritage Party, joins us from Vancouver to explain this situation. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to be back with you.
Thank you. Now, I bet you're not surprised. I don't think anyone who really understands genuine Canada is surprised by this number.
No, I'm not. Although, you know, this debate has been simmering beneath the surface for quite a long time. I think it's important to remember that, in fact, every political party in Canada supports the death penalty. The only real difference is that CHP would limit it to only the most heinous of the guilty, whereas the other parties are willing to execute more than 100,000 a year for the so-called crime of being conceived at an inconvenient time.
OK, let's keep it to the death penalty, though, for those who've committed a crime, because it's very specific here. Now, I think what we see, and this is, again, just applied common sense, if a life sentence means that, and we're not talking about some kid who goes wrong or someone who steals a car, for goodness sake, there are probably too many people in prison. But if you plan and execute a murder, that you go to prison for the rest of your life. If there was a genuine sentence of life in prison for murder, that the support for capital punishment declines. And that, again, is very understandable.
It would, but Michael, let me give you a statistic that is almost never cited. And I admit my facts are about 14 years out of date, but back in 1998, so a study was done that showed that in the third of a century since the Liberals abolished the death penalty, there had at that point been more than 78 innocent Canadians who had been killed by convicted killers who were out on parole or day care or a day pass or at the end of their sentence. But there's also prison guards and other inmates who get killed by killers who are in jail. There has to be some protection of innocent life involved in our criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. You know, we've long advocated that for nonviolent crimes, restitution is the best punishment. We wouldn't need to build new prisons then if we were simply using prison to protect the public from violent criminals. But even there are the prison guards and other inmates who are at risk.
Mm. Well, look, I'll be quite open about my position. I'm opposed to the death penalty. I do believe that premeditated murder, you serve life in prison. I think rape, particularly if it's a graphic or more than one, you serve life in prison. I think there should be longer sentences for violent crime. I think there should be shorter sentences, actually, for things like possession of minor drugs and so on. I'm not trying to penalise or criminalise society, but I want to protect society. I don't want the state to have that much power. I do think there's a sanctity to human life, even human life that's committed incredible evil, so they have to die in prison. I also believe that if we would reintroduce the death penalty, and we're not going to, but if we did, we would then ally ourselves with some very regressive and repressive countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia, rather than Denmark and Australia and Britain. Do we really want to go down that path?
Well, I think we would concede that those countries that you've named use it rather promiscuously. Look, according to the standards that we have established for reintroducing the death penalty, there would probably only have been a half dozen in the last 30 years. I mean, I think of names like Clifford Olson and Paul Bernardo and maybe Robert Picton. Only, as I said at the outset, the most heinous of the guilty is, there's something in the human psyche that cries out that people like that ought to forfeit their own lives for their crimes.
Mm-hmm. Let's, as I said, I don't think this will be introduced. Stephen Harper was asked this question directly. I think it was just last year. Let's see how he reacted to that question now, please.
Capital punishment.
I don't see the country wanting to do that.
You don't sound as firm as.
Well, I'm not. I personally think there are times where capital punishment is appropriate, but I've also committed that I'm not. In the next Parliament, I have no plans to bring that issue forward.
See, this has always been the problem with issues, this great dichotomy between popular will and the establishment, if you like. In fact, he's wrong. The country do want the death penalty. The country is very conservative on many moral issues, but they're dictated to by a fairly small group of people in areas of influence.
Well, Michael, there's another point here. It is like, where is the peg of the ultimate sanction, the ultimate penalty? When the death penalty was abolished, really effectively in 1964, formally in 1974, we pulled out that peg. Now, the initial response was that it would be replaced by life in prison, which you just referred to.
Yeah.
But then it became life in prison with parole at 25 years, and then with parole at 12 or 13 years, and then at 10 years, and then at 7 years. Without that peg, the ultimate penalty begins to slide down and down until we're at the point where the perpetrator of a really heinous crime suffers far less than someone who, who breaks into a store and steals something.
Mm-hmm. What, however, does it say about Canadian society or any society if it does institute the death penalty? Look, I don't really care. I do not care very much at all about a murder. I'm always extremely disturbed by these fanatics who go down to the United States to light candles and pray, pretend to pray, outside a prison where a mass rapist murderer is being executed. I don't really care about that person. And a lot of these people can't even name the victims. But I do care about the good guys, about us. I think it lowers us. I think it diminishes us to a certain extent that we would actually execute someone even as evil as that.
Well, Michael, there is a biblical principle involved,
Yeah.
And our policies are rooted in biblical principles. Now, one of those is...
Well, I hope you don't eat pork or bacon, then.
I don't.
Really?
I don't.
Good
Absolutely.
Lord.
No, because I believe that the dietary laws were given for our health and our protection.
Right.
Some of those foods are not good for us.
All right. Are you mixing different types of cloth? Let's not talk about, because I've got to tell you, my friend, once you mention biblical principles, you've just lost the argument here. We're not a biblical, we're a country of many different religions and different cultures and different ideas. This is a practical issue of politics. If you kill people, even if they're vile criminals, don't you think it actually says something about the greater society? Put them in prison for their life. They will die in prison. But to take away their life, what does it say about you and about me?
Well, again, let me give you the fact that
Very quick.
convicted murderers kept in prison for a long period of time have murdered prison guards and other prisoners.
Oh, we must make sure they don't.
The protection of human life sometimes requires taking out those who can be proved beyond a shadow of a doubt to be vile criminals and unsafe.
Okay, no, hey, I respect your point of view, and I won't be sending you a bacon sandwich in the mail. Thank you so much for your time.
See you in March.